What's up fam, my name is Tech, and like many people I've been having a very mixed experience with Back 4 Blood since it came out. Being someone who played both Left 4 Dead 1 and 2 back on the Xbox 360, I think aside from a few issues, the gameplay and the gunplay have been pushed in a good direction from their predecessor. But when it comes to the story and the characters, Turtle Rock took a huge step back in this game. Many people are quick to write off these issues and say that the game is trash, but I've been recently contemplating why it feels that way. Personally, I think it doesn't solely come from a lack of good writing, though the writing can be cringy here to say the least. I think it comes down to some key design decisions that the developers made throughout the game's conception. To me, there are three noteworthy points here: the cast size, the plot direction, and the setting. So starting with the first point, we're able to choose from 8 playable cleaners this time as opposed to the original game's 4. I think the purpose of increasing the cast size here was to add more complexity to the gameplay and to have character choice tie in with the game's card progression. In some ways, this is a good thing, as we're allowed to include our choice of characters into our builds, and it adds to the co-op experience as you and other players are able to form your team the way you like it. The issue is that this benefit comes with a cost. Say for example, the writers at Turtle Rock by some strange coincidence happen to make the script and lore the exact same word count as Left 4 Dead. This would mean that each character would have half the work dedicated to being fleshed out compared to the original characters. Each character would comment on the environment less than before, and each character would interact with each other less than before. This lends itself to the characters feeling flat because they don't get enough space to breathe amidst the other 7 playable characters. If we're being realistic, the script probably had to be padded in order to account for the cast size, and because of this, we end up with all the many cringy lines such as Holly's no free hugs or half the cast calling Hoffman fat. On the player's side, we get half as much time to spend with each character. When we loaded up a game of Left 4 Dead 2, we were going to spend time with Coach, Ellis, Nick, and Rochelle every time, aside from the DLC, which consisted of characters we were already familiar with. Literally every time we played it, we were able to bond with each character. We even had the chance to experience different conversations every time we played. We could go through a level one time, and one character might have certain dialogue trigger, where on subsequent playthroughs we might get a different dialogue. This makes the characters in Left 4 Dead 4 feel like they have far more depth than the ones in Back 4 Blood. I think if Turtle Rock had chosen to start with fewer characters, mayhaps 6 or 5, it could have given them more time and flexibility to write further character interaction, and they could give the characters more agency. Knowing that this game was meant to be supported after launch, they would have the option of adding more characters as DLC. Moving on to the issue with plot direction, it's something that stems directly from the previous issue of increasing the cast size. In order to create a story for this game, it was written in such a way that needed to account for the fact that not all characters would be present at any given time. Because of this, the characters themselves were not made to be the driving motivation for the plot. Instead, Turtle Rock decided to create an outside character, some military general guy. He sends the players on their missions to do whatever it is that we were supposed to be doing in this game. This general guy is so detached from what we as players are experiencing in-game that I wouldn't be surprised if the majority of the community didn't even know his name. Because the cleaners are just doing what he tells them to do, none of them have any agency in the plot, and if your main characters are not invested in your story, how can the players themselves be? The other strange thing to this is that the devs seem to want the general to be an important part of the story. This is exemplified by the cutscenes leading up to the final act. In those scenes, they spend a large part of it showing him struggle against the abomination, and for some reason the player is supposed to care about this. At this point, this guy is just a voice on the radio and barely a menu screen. Honestly, I had more connection to the lady who sells you the new cards. I even had more connection to the intel folder in camp that lets you change your deck. At least it shows up multiple times in game to actually help you. When you compare this to Left 4 Dead, you were following a group of 4 survivors who, as we know it, had no one else to rely on. Their goal in most respects was to survive, which is something we can all understand at a baseline. The plot was internally motivated, and they were far less frequently guided by outside forces. The few times they were, like where the gun store guy wanted some soda, they were just helping him because he could help them, which was clear motivation. Also, you never got the chance to actually see him as far as I can remember. Therefore, the focus was never taken off of the party. The focus in this story is being taken off the party all the time, usually for this guy, and even this guy. The last thing I think holds the story back is the setting of the game. And when I say setting, I mean the actual in-game environments and the framing of the story. For the actual in-game levels, there are some very unique locations in the game, and where these are implemented, I think they are done very well. But for the few levels that are recycled, like the Fort Hope entrance, I feel that these levels make the environments feel more repetitive than they should. On paper, I think the decision to have the same starting point multiple times doesn't necessitate this feeling. If they implemented it better, I think it could give the player the feeling that their actions have affected the environment in a meaningful way. But because those levels feel so short, it all feels like unnecessary padding. This creates a rushed and repetitive feeling that doesn't help the game's case at all. I feel the atmosphere also suffers from a lack of distinct audio cues for each special infected. In Left 4 Dead 4, each special infected had very distinct audio cues and music that played whenever they spawned nearby. This strengthened the gameplay by giving you enough time to prepare for a specific enemy, which is far more difficult to do here. It also made the special infected so much more unique. We as players were able to bond with them more as if they were also lovable characters. Also, the distinction of each act is not very clear. The length of each act feels arbitrary. The number of levels in each act are in order 13, 10, 9, and 1. This accounts to 33 levels where 2 or 3 of them are partially the same location and one of them is the final boss. Again, comparing to Left 4 Dead 2's campaigns on launch, there were 5 campaigns, each with 4 levels. That makes 20 levels in total. That's rounded to a third less levels, but it felt like more game because you spent more time in each level. Fewer longer levels meant less interruptions by menus and loading screens and more time playing the game. It was so much easier to get immersed into it. Also, each campaign had very strong framing. They were all represented by movie posters where the survivors were front and center. These help very much to separate each campaign from the others, and it helps each one be more memorable. I mean, if I bring up Dark Carnival or Dead Center, I'm sure people who played Left 4 Dead 2 will immediately remember their favorite parts from those levels, or even picture the movie poster. If I mention Blue Dog Hollow, I'm willing to bet most players won't know which campaign that is. Ultimately, what happens in the story is quite forgettable. I think the key takeaway is immersion. All 3 of those issues hurt the game's ability to immerse the player in the world and story of Back 4 Blood. And if this game were to be judged solely on its own merit, I don't think players would care that much. But Turtle Rock chose to name it and market it as a spiritual successor to Left 4 Dead, and when you compare yourself to such a beloved game, it's fair to get criticism if any part of the product fails to live up to the predecessor. But that's just my opinion. This is the first time I've ever done a video like this, so if you liked it or shared my opinion, a like would be appreciated. If you disagree or want to add to what I've said, definitely drop a comment. Later, fam.